Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the incredible art form of television directing with Emmy-nominated TV directors Lesli Linka Glatter, who directed all of the episodes on Zero Day, as well as being an executive producer on the series, and is also president of the Directors Guild of America. I'm also joined today by Nicole Kassell, who directed episodes 1 and 2 of Sirens, as well as being an executive producer on the show, and Jessica Lee Gagne, who directed episode 7 of season 2 of Severance, as well as being a cinematographer on the series. Starting and jumping into talking about all of your projects, Lesli, I know that when you first got really interested in Zero Day, that you immediately started diving into huge amounts of research, having conversations with intelligence professionals from NSA, CIA, cybersecurity analysts to really kind of pull together such a realistic idea of what would it look like if a Zero Day event happened. And I was interested in how those conversations really helped in terms of not just research, but also as you were starting to think visually about how you wanted to tell this story on screen.
That is a great question, Mara. And first of all, I have to say, I'm so thrilled to be here with these two other amazing directors because the work is so profoundly different.
Mhm.
And what's so exciting is to have a conversation with other directors about what their process is. So I'm just thrilled to be here. But what you hit on is one of the things that is so exciting to me. I mean, this project is thematically about what is truth in a post-truth world. And what is our relationship to truth when you can't differentiate between fact and opinion, which is the world we're living in. And so for me to do that research and to have it be realistically real, you have to go back to the source and ask the questions. And yes, we're taking a premise that jumps over what can be done realistically, though there have been many zero-day events since 2014. There's just never been one that impacts every industry simultaneously. But by taking that idea, you force your characters and your world to look at how would you behave if put in an extreme situation. Would we behave better than we did at 9/11? Would we find the truth and move forward, or would we just want to attack? Like when fear is what you're basing everything on, you don't make great decisions. So, from years of being the executive producer and director of Homeland, I went right to the source of the intelligence community. And a number of the key advisors, some people came out of that Homeland time because we every year went and met with the intelligence community. Jeremy Bash, who was chief of staff of the CIA and chief of staff of the Pentagon, so that's quite heavy background. He was a great source of information. I obviously read every book you could on Zero Days, and there are many of them. I have way too much information in my brain. And then Clint Watts was another source who uncovered the Russia hack. So he's one of the top people in cybersecurity. So it was an amazing education. And then, of course, you have to tell a narrative story. So that was the beginning of the process.
No, I love how detailed it was for you. And Nicole, in directing Sirens, I heard that when you first, after reading the script, sat down with Molly Smith Metzler, who created the series and wrote it, that you kind of came to her and had already started putting together essentially a lookbook of images, but also the idea of music. And how did you really want to use that to communicate the vision that you'd started having of what this might look like off of the page?
Um, yes, that is exactly what I did. Pretty early on, I want to show what's in my mind's eye because um, when you're committing to a project or they're committing to you, you want to make sure you're making the same thing. And the best way for me or many of us to do that is to start with like, this is what is in my mind's eye, and this is what you will get. And so, and it's really fun for me to just it helps me connect to the material more deeply immediately. And so I pull together pictures and then for Sirens, there was some, I don't often pull songs, but for this one, I felt like the tone is so specific and fine line and irreverent and uncanny and funny, but dramatic. So I pulled together a playlist with the help of my daughter that really nailed it. And that was just really exciting. It was really fun to watch Molly's face as I was showing her the pictures, because she just got more and more delighted. But that is how I like to kind of, when I'm courting a project or a project's courting me, that's a key part of the marriage contract. So
I
love
do that too,
I bet
Nikki. I
you
do
do.
that
I'm
too.
sure you do.
It
And
helps me see it in my
yeah,
own head. And
and
am I the right person?
exactly.
Yeah.
Jessica just films the whole season. It's like,
Well, exactly.
I have to do that with the directors that I've worked with, though, as a cinematographer. It's like the
right.
same thing. We all kind of have a version of that. It's important to make sure we're making the same project.
No, that's
Yeah.
such a great point. And, Jessica, in the episode that you directed of Severance this season, you were kind of really tasked with showing us sides of Lumen that we've never seen on screen before in the testing rooms that we suddenly see Gemma / Miss Casey going through. And I love the way that they're designed with like such specific aesthetics, and even just the idea of that feeling of how many times has she been into this room before? Is this a newer testing room for her? And that you kind of used period pieces as inspiration for them as well. And I was interested in how you started mapping out the vision for each of the testing rooms.
Well, that's actually like my comfort zones, working with the production design team.
Mhm.
As a cinematographer, I've always been, creeping into the production design office. It's so much of the world that you're bringing to life is made by them. So I always kind of like sneak in. And finally, being a director, which is something I didn't expect to do, I got to really fully harness that and work with the production design team in kind of this like seamless way. Each room that we did was inspired by a different photograph. So they kind of, and they were from different time periods, but we had a Diane Arbus black and white living room, which was the inspiration for the green Christmas room, which is interesting because like a black and white shot, everything's like grayscale. And then we got the idea of making this room all green, which except for some red little highlights in there, like me today. And then the airplane was it was an Eggleston pick. And then I think the dentist room was Lynn Cohen's photography just in general. So I come from photography and I like to anchor myself a little bit in that. And for me, my comfort was leaning into that aesthetic thing for episode 7, because everything that was the memories and the backstory and the emotion was a very new place for me to go. And I don't know, it was exciting though. That was the most exciting part about it in the end.
I love that. Lesli, I was also really interested for you in how you really used a lot of shade and light in Zero Day, because, it's that idea of like what's happening in the shadows, what's happening in the light. And there's a huge amount of scenes that take place at night. And so you've used the idea of light and shadows very specifically in terms of the story that you're telling, what the characters are discussing. And I was interested in your approach with all of that.
Well, I echo the fact that visuals are so important. And in the beginning, everything is a source of inspiration. And I use a lot of photographs as well, whether it's Elliot Erwitt or Saul Leiter, or, it's like qualities of light. And how does that inform character? Because at the end of the day, it's all about characters. And for me, this was about what is everyone's moral compass? What is your relationship personally to truth? Yes, you have the macro relationship, but you also have the micro. You have the interpersonal. So, is for Mullen, for Robert De Niro's character, truth is truth. Yeah. And for Angela Bassett, who plays the president, truth is truth, but it's not always the most important thing. So these things are about light and shadow. So it's reflected in the subtext as well as the text, and you want to have that reflected in the visuals as well. And I had an amazing collaborative cinematographer who is also nominated, John Conroy, who is just the best, the most wonderful collaborator. And so that became part of our process together, which was amazing. And we also had to deal with with Robert De Niro's question of acuity, and we did a lot of research on the nature of memory. If you are suffering from memory loss, you want to recreate your world. And you take everything away and then you put it back piece by piece to try to remember. And that was fascinating. How do you translate that? This is what, both of these amazing directors, what we get to do is how do you translate emotional states and ideas into pictures?
Absolutely. I mean, Nicole, you get to kind of play with color in such an interesting way because there's these very specific color palettes for each of the characters. And obviously you have Devon coming from Buffalo and wearing darker colors against, Millie Alcock's character Simone, who's like wearing very bright, vibrant colors and really trying to immerse herself into this world. And, Julianne Moore's character, Michaela, is kind of the one that sets the rules for this community and this society. So they all have very different aesthetics. And I know that Greek mythology especially inspired some of the look and feel for Julianne Moore, and just wanted to ask about coming up with the different palettes for each of these characters and what it represented.
Well, exactly what you just said. It was so much fun, but right on the page, Julianne Moore's character is written in her introduction like a goddess. And there's nothing practical about wearing a green silk gown to release a bird in the nature, but it's just what I saw, and I never questioned the absurdity of it. And that's, as beautiful and regal as it is, it speaks to her level of wealth, that whatever she chooses to be the rule is the rule. And then the culture of this island is this Lily Pulitzer Easter egg aesthetic. And, we are poking fun at a real culture, but heightened it to indicate like we are making fun of, we're making fun, but we're having fun too.
Yes.
And then Devon is the all black, just very grounded, very real, a kind of irreverent. She brings a lot of irreverence to it. So each of them, we went to the extreme of each to lean into that tone. Like it is world building, even though we're making a fictional, real contemporary island, it is still, because of the tone, I really thought of it as world building.
No, it's wonderfully done. And Jessica, I love that you were mentioning that you're wearing that pop of red because, Severance is a show that's so specific with some of the uses of color in it. And even the color of red, I know Ben Stiller talks about how it's only present when there's a sense of real love. And so in filming those sequences where we first see the flashbacks to when Mark and Gemma first met and, they're giving blood. So we see the blood traveling down, but even just the detail of Adams holding a red pen in that scene. And how did you kind of go into creating this backstory with the two of them and thinking about the language that had already been created and built by the show for the audience?
Yeah, well, in creating the language of season one, we were not thinking about season two. We were not thinking about what was the life before, for Mark. Like even, I don't know that it was figured out, not to the extent that season two figures it out anyways. But like Leslie says, it's about the characters and it's about their perspective. And Severance season one especially is seen through Mark's eyes or felt through Mark's world. So that limited palette to me and that kind of austere and the winter of it, all of those things, like the cooler palette, they kind of show his take on life, how he's feeling life, like what he's choosing to live in his world. I mean, this person is like numbing everything possible. He comes home, he drinks, he goes to work not to feel anything. So literally he doesn't want to open himself up to all the range of emotions and possibilities that we can have as human beings. And in episode 7, it was about breaking all of that. It was like, what was the life before being severed? And that's one of the things that attracted me the most to direct and shoot this episode, was because I wanted to be the one finding out what this language was going to be. And it's like, what is life if you can feel and live all of the emotions? So we opened up the spectrum of color. And the first instinct of, like, the first time red came up as a conversation, it was the hibiscus flower. I was obsessed with having hibiscus flowers for her, watering. And just those little moments of life where where there's no weight and it's just the everyday, we were trying to infuse that in there as well. And having them in this like house, which was actually the house I was renting for 2 years when I was working on this. Yeah, I knew this house and I love this house. I chose to live there because I didn't want to live in the city anymore. And it brought something to my own life that was really beautiful. And then like the idea came up to shoot the flashbacks there. And we were just opening ourselves up to nature and life in another way. So, I mean, that's kind of
Amazing
how that all happened.
Where do you shoot, Jess?
Well, that house is in Nyack, and it's actually
in Nyack. Oh.
walking distance to Mark's house. So if you remember, there's like a blue, there's all these blue houses that are like identical. That's literally like up 2 blocks from where that house was. But we shoot, around New York and a little bit in Jersey as well for the Bell Labs
Yeah.
company. Lumen is there.
It's amazing. Leslie, one of those shots in particular I wanted to ask you about was there's one point in the series where you have De Niro's character, George Mellon, and he is coming out of kind of the place that he's living with his wife, and there's a whole crowd of people who come and start attacking their vehicle. And I heard that that was shot over the course of 3 days. And obviously, again, it's kind of like really using the idea of nighttime and light and people coming out of the shadows. And even just logistically, you have so many actors that you're responsible for in a scene like that. You have to think about the stunt work of it. And so I was really interested in the pre-planning for something as extensive as that a scene like that was for you.
Well, I came out of a modern dance and choreography background. And what I love about directing or anything in filmmaking is that we all have different paths. There's not one right way to be doing what we do. So my path was through modern dance, and I spent almost 11 years overseas back in the dark ages when the American government sponsored the arts. Yes, I know it's inconceivable now, but so I was in Europe for almost 6 years and Asia for 5. So, choreographing action, for me feels kind of second nature. I love that challenge. It's like moving people across a stage. But for me, if it's not, again, character based, if it doesn't move the story forward, who cares about blowing up a truck, really, at the end of the day? But if it's based on what's happening emotionally for the characters or what's happening in the world, it's incredibly exciting. So yes, everything was storyboarded. There was it was shot over 3 nights. We designed it from like the inside of the car going outward. And also to try to avoid our main actors working literally 3 full nights. So we divided it up. I had the brilliant AD, Michael Lerman, and we just sorted out the best way to move through it. The background people, I always believe those background actors can make such a difference, and you treat them with great respect, like you treat everyone, and they were awesome. But trying to say cut and have people stop, they got so overexcited about being these like almost January 6th mob, that it was really hard to calm them down. But fortunately, all went beautifully. But again, it was all about light and shadow. What you see, what all reflected about the nature of truth, and in my mind. But you have to, again, this is a paranoid conspiracy thriller. You know, uh, and that genre is a really interesting one, and where you push the limits of that. Yeah. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. We shot for 103 days, and with the most glorious crew, and of course, a director's dream of a cast.
It's wonderful. No, Nicole, one of the other things with Sirens is the fact that there's all of these elements of class and power structure
Mm,
constantly at play and in discussion and conversation in this series, both in terms of the storyline, but also visually in a lot of the choices that you're making, such as, where Michaela lives, Julianne Moore's character, where it's this setting kind of on this cliff top and you have this set of steps going down. And I know that that was something that was really important to you to find a
mm.
location that had those steps as part of
Yes.
that discussion. What were some of the other visual nods and creative choices that you made with that in mind?
Well, that staircase was everything for sure. That we based our entire production around finding that location. We scouted Boston, we scouted New York, and that was the last house we saw in New York. And
Wow.
I know. And but per your earlier question about working with Molly, filming on a staircase like that is also enormously challenging. So I said to her, how important is this staircase? And, she's like, out of 10, a 12, and so
Wow.
then it's like when a writer says that, then it's like, then I fully understand the degree of which we're going to lean into this. And then stairs play throughout the series. You've got the grand staircase in the entryway, and then the back staircase in the kitchen, the kind of servants' quarters, and that's where Simone Millie Alcock's character goes up and down that area, and at the end, there's a critical moment on that staircase. So using that as the metaphor that it's obvious that it is of this whole world is about climbing the ladder, and the higher you climb, the more at risk you are, and and under the power of a Peter or a Michaela, like you can lose status at the snap of a finger. And so just wanted to imbue that kind of sense of danger also in, even though it's this delightful sugar candy wrapped world, no one is safe. And, and the three muses, kind of that we called the fates in the background, you don't see anything bad happen to anyone actually, but like when Devin's character says, so like, how do you get into the society? They're like, you don't ask, they just blow her off. Like they turn ice cold. So that was part of, what we wanted to lean into. And obviously being on the cliff, the Sirens, the mythology of the Sirens is that it's three sisters actually who are their mother who has abandoned them. And the sailors crash on the shore. So having the cliff's edge was very important. That also obviously plays into the plot as well. And that's the question that we're kind of lacing throughout the entire thing, is who here is actually the siren?
No, definitely. And Jessica, with Severance as well, one of the shots that's so impressive in terms of how you did it practically is where we start with Miss Casey and with Mark, and then we travel literally through the mechanisms of the desk, through the floors of Lumen to where they're being observed and watched. And there's so many elements at play with the fact that, you had to light the cables themselves because you couldn't light it externally because the camera has to move through that mechanism. And I was really fascinated in how you set about figuring out the logistics of how are we actually going to film this practically instead of doing it as a VFX shot.
It was a long process. So one of my advantages as being a first-time director, and to be honest, I think that this is how I needed it to happen to let myself go there, was the fact that I was around to shoot this show. So that's like a massive privilege because I can be there to like work on things with time. And early on, even this was right before the strike, I know there was like the first version of Seven came out while we were shooting. And I worked directly with the writer to make the transitions into how things would flow together. Because it was a strength of mine to be thinking of like these kind of things. And I had to present it to the studio and to Ben and to everyone, like all of these transitions. And I remember like the first person I showed, I did a huge series of storyboards to be able to do this. And I really don't like storyboards. So it was a big effort. And I showed this shot to Ben and he was like, well, it's really cool, but if you want to do that, you need to do it practically because like he was like, I'm afraid it would look too, video gamey or whatever. And then I had to be like, oh, how do I make this? Okay. And the idea of how to move through the cables actually came from our set deck teams, our on-set dresser. That's how like the Severance crew is. Like everyone is in everyone's thing. Everyone has ideas come from anywhere. And for me, that's a big lesson of working with Ben and seeing him work, is like being open to things shifting and sometimes
team sport. It's a team sport that speaks
100%.
to how beautiful that is. I love hearing that. Like,
and it cannot even be your department, but like you're open to ideas coming from anywhere, you're gonna make the best thing possible.
Absolutely. I love that came from your, set. Was it decorating team?
It's the on-set dresser.
On-set dresser. I mean, that's awesome.
So yeah, we were actually shooting episode 9 and 10 cabin work at Kaufman, and I asked to bring in an extra camera that day, and I pulled one of the operators off to work on this just to think, because you need time to think sometimes. So I was like, go in a corner while we're doing these like single camera things with another camera over here. Look at the camera, figure out how to move it through cables. I was like, I think you're going to be using a probe. We have to figure out which probe, this, and that. And they just stood there and looked at the camera all day. And at one point, the set dresser walked by John and he was like, well, and he drew, I actually have this drawing. He drew a drawing of this like rig of how to rig it to a ceiling and how basically the camera was moving down. Anyways, and he had figured it all out with like collars that would wrap around and the cable. So yeah, they can. And from that point, we went on to doing the next phase, building the pieces to make it. And at one point we were shooting it.
Amazing.
That's so great.
It's really great.
It's amazing. Well, you've all done such phenomenal work on all of these shows. So I want to congratulate you on all of that and the well-deserved Emmy nominations. And thank you so much for sharing all of this insight and all of your experience. Appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Love being with this group.
Same. Congratulations, everyone.